The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Marcus Thompson adjusted his ceremonial uniform one last time. After 15 years of faithful service as a royal guard, he had never imagined this day would come. The weight of the screwdriver in his jacket pocket felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried in his distinguished career. Marcus had always been the model guard. His superiors praised his dedication, his fellow guards respected his leadership, and the royal family trusted him implicitly. He had protected dignitaries, prevented security breaches, and maintained the honor of his position without a single blemish on his record. But today was different. Today, everything he had worked for was about to crumble. The trouble had started 3 months earlier when Marcus discovered irregularities in the palace security budget. Someone was siphoning money from the fund designated for equipment upgrades and staff training. At first, he thought it was a simple accounting error. He approached his immediate supervisor, Captain Reynolds, with his concerns, expecting a quick resolution instead. Captain Reynolds dismissed his findings and warned him against stirring up unnecessary trouble. The captain's reaction struck Marcus as odd, but he decided to dig deeper on his own time. What he uncovered shocked him to his core. The corruption went far beyond simple embezzlement. Critical security equipment was being replaced with cheaper, substandard alternatives, while the difference in cost was being pocketed by someone high up in the command structure. Marcus spent sleepless nights documenting evidence, taking photographs of invoices, and recording conversations. He knew that if the wrong people discovered his investigation, his career would be over. But he also knew that compromised security equipment put everyone at risk, including the royal family he had sworn to protect. When he finally gathered enough evidence, Marcus made the decision that would change his life forever. He couldn't go through normal channels because he suspected Captain Reynolds was involved. He needed to get the evidence directly to someone he could trust, someone with the authority to act on his findings. The only person who fit that description was Sir Edmund Hartwell, the head of royal security, who would be attending the morning ceremony. The screwdriver in his pocket wasn't a weapon. It was a key. Marcus had discovered that the evidence he needed was locked in a secure filing cabinet in Captain Reynolds' office. The captain had refused to provide access to certain financial records, claiming they were classified. Marcus knew that without those final pieces of evidence, his case would fall apart. His years of investigation would mean nothing. As he stood in formation with his fellow guards, Marcus could see Sir Edmund approaching with his entourage. This was his chance. He had carefully planned every detail. During the changing of the guard ceremony, there would be a brief moment when he could approach Sir Edmund without raising suspicion. He would present his evidence and explain the situation. But first, he needed to retrieve those final documents from Captain Reynolds' office. The screwdriver would allow him to access the filing cabinet quietly. He had practiced the technique dozens of times at home, timing himself to ensure he could complete the task quickly and efficiently. Marcus checked his watch. The ceremony would begin in 20 minutes. He had a small window of opportunity to slip away, retrieve the evidence, and return to his position before anyone noticed his absence. His heart pounded as he mentally rehearsed his plan one final time. Everything depended on perfect timing and a little bit of luck. Marcus slipped away from his formation as quietly as possible, his polished boots making soft clicking sounds on the marble floor. The palace corridors were mostly empty at this hour, with most of the staff preparing for the morning ceremony. He knew the building like the back of his hand, having walked these halls for over a decade. Captain Reynolds' office was located on the second floor of the administrative wing. Marcus had been there countless times for briefings and evaluations, but never under these circumstances. His palms were sweating as he approached the heavy wooden door. He paused for a moment, listening for any sounds from within. Silence. The office was empty, just as he had expected. Captain Reynolds would be busy with ceremony preparations for at least another 15 minutes. Marcus quickly moved to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room. It was an old, sturdy piece of furniture with a simple lock mechanism. He pulled out the screwdriver and carefully inserted it into the lock. His hands trembled slightly as he worked. This wasn't just about breaking into a filing cabinet. He was crossing a line that he could never uncross. If someone discovered him now, there would be no explanation that would save his career. But the faces of his fellow guards flashed through his mind. Men and women who trusted that their equipment would protect them when it mattered. Most of the lock clicked open after a few tense moments. Marcus quickly rifled through the files, looking for the financial records he needed. He found them in a folder marked Confidential Equipment Procurement. His heart sank as he reviewed the documents. The corruption was even worse than he had suspected. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been diverted over the past 2 years. He quickly photographed each page with his phone, making sure to capture every detail. The evidence was damning. It showed a clear pattern of inflated invoices, fake vendor contracts, and equipment that existed only on paper. The safety of everyone in the palace had been compromised for financial gain. As Marcus was photographing the final document, he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. His blood ran cold. Someone was approaching the office. He quickly closed the filing cabinet and slipped the screwdriver back into his pocket. The footsteps were getting closer. The door handle turned, and Marcus found himself face to face with Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, one of his junior colleagues. She stopped in her tracks, clearly surprised to find him there. "Marcus, what are you doing in the captain's office?" she asked, her brow furrowed with confusion. Marcus thought quickly. He couldn't tell her the truth, but he also couldn't lie convincingly. Sarah was sharp, and she would see through any excuse he might offer. Instead, he decided to take a calculated risk. "Sarah, I need you to trust me on this," he said quietly. "I can't explain everything right now, but I'm trying to protect all of us. What I'm doing here could save lives." Sarah studied his face for a long moment. She had worked under Marcus for 3 years and had always respected his judgment. She could see the stress etched in his features, the weight of whatever burden he was carrying. "Does this have something to do with the equipment problems we've been having?" she asked. Over the past few months, several guards had complained about malfunctioning radios and faulty protective gear. Marcus nodded slowly. "More than you know. But I need to handle this carefully. Too many people could get hurt if this information falls into the wrong hands." Sarah stepped aside, allowing him to pass. "Be careful, Marcus. Whatever you're involved in, it looks dangerous." As Marcus hurried back toward the ceremony area, he realized that time was running out. The evidence was now safely stored on his phone, but he still needed to get it to Sir Edmund. The ceremony would be starting any moment, and his absence would soon be noticed. Marcus arrived back at the courtyard just as the ceremony was beginning. He quickly took his position in the formation, hoping that his brief absence had gone unnoticed. The morning air was crisp, and the sound of ceremonial drums echoed off the palace walls. Hundreds of spectators had gathered to witness the changing of the guard, a tradition that had continued for centuries. Sir Edmund Hartwell stood on the reviewing platform, his distinguished gray hair catching the morning sunlight. At 62, he was a veteran of both military service and palace security. Marcus had always admired his integrity and dedication to duty. If anyone could handle this situation properly, it was Sir Edmund. The ceremony proceeded with its usual precision. Guards marched in perfect formation, their movements synchronized after countless hours of practice. Marcus tried to focus on the routine, but his mind kept racing. He needed to find the right moment to approach Sir Edmund without creating a scene or arousing suspicion. As the ceremony neared its conclusion, Marcus noticed Captain Reynolds standing near the platform. The captain's eyes seemed to be scanning the formation more carefully than usual. When his gaze fell on Marcus, there was something in his expression that made Marcus's stomach turn. Did he know about the break-in? The final trumpet call signaled the end of the ceremony. As the formation began to disperse, Marcus saw his opportunity. Sir Edmund was stepping down from the platform, moving toward the palace entrance. Marcus broke from his position and began walking quickly in the same direction. "Sir Edmund," he called out as respectfully as possible. "Might I have a word with you, sir?" The head of security turned, recognizing Marcus from years of service. "Of course, Thompson. What can I do for you?" Before Marcus could respond, he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. Captain Reynolds had appeared behind him, his face stern and unforgiving. "Thompson, you're out of position," the captain said firmly. "Return to your duties immediately, sir." "This is a matter of urgent security," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I have information that Sir Edmund needs to see." Captain Reynolds' grip tightened on Marcus's shoulder. "Whatever concerns you have can be addressed through proper channels. Sir Edmund doesn't have time for junior guards who can't follow protocol." Sir Edmund looked between the two men. Sensing the tension, "What sort of information are we talking about, Thompson?" Marcus reached into his pocket to retrieve his phone, where he had stored the photographs of the evidence. But as his hand moved toward his pocket, Captain Reynolds reacted with surprising speed and aggression. "He's armed," the captain shouted, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Security breach." The accusation sent shockwaves through the remaining crowd. Several guards immediately surrounded Marcus, their hands moving to their weapons. Sir Edmund stepped back, his face showing both confusion and concern. "I'm not armed," Marcus protested, but his voice was drowned out by the commotion. "I have evidence of corruption in the security budget. Captain Reynolds is involved." But his words only seemed to make the situation worse. To the guards responding to the scene, it looked like Marcus was making wild accusations to cover for some sort of attack on their superior officer. Captain Reynolds continued his performance, maintaining his grip on Marcus's arm. "He was in my office earlier, breaking into confidential files. I believe he's been compromised by outside forces." The screwdriver in Marcus's pocket suddenly felt like a weapon of mass destruction. He knew that when they searched him, finding it would only confirm Captain Reynolds' story. There would be no way to explain why he had it without admitting to breaking into the filing cabinet. Sir Edmund raised his hand, trying to restore order. "Everyone calm down. Let's sort this out properly." He looked directly at Marcus. "Thompson, what exactly do you want to show me?" Marcus realized this might be his only chance. Even with guards surrounding him, even with Captain Reynolds spinning his web of lies, he had to try to get the truth out. "Sir, I've been investigating financial irregularities in our security budget for the past 3 months, he said quickly. "Equipment purchases that don't exist, inflated invoices, compromised safety gear. I have photographic evidence on my phone that proves Captain Reynolds has been embezzling funds and putting all of our lives at risk." The courtyard fell silent, except for the distant sound of traffic beyond the palace gates. Sir Edmund's expression shifted from confusion to intense focus as he processed Marcus's accusations. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. "That's enough." Captain Reynolds barked, his face reddening with what appeared to be righteous indignation. "This man has clearly lost his mind. He broke into my private office, and now he's making wild accusations to cover his crimes." But Sir Edmund held up his hand, his sharp eyes studying both men carefully. After decades in security work, he had developed an instinct for detecting deception. Something about Captain Reynolds' overly dramatic reaction troubled him. "Thompson," Sir Edmund said calmly, "you mentioned photographic evidence. May I see your phone?" Marcus carefully reached for his phone, moving slowly to avoid any misunderstanding. But as he pulled it from his pocket, the screwdriver came out with it, clattering to the ground with a metallic ring that seemed to echo through the courtyard. "There." Captain Reynolds shouted triumphantly. "He was planning to attack you with that weapon. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent." The guards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. The situation was spiraling out of control faster than Marcus could have imagined. The screwdriver lying on the ground looked incredibly damning, even though its intended purpose had been entirely different. "Sir Edmund," Marcus said urgently, "that screwdriver was used to open the filing cabinet in Captain Reynolds' office. I needed access to financial records that he refused to provide through normal channels. The evidence I found proves systematic corruption that is compromised our entire security operation." Sir Edmund bent down and picked up the screwdriver, examining it carefully. It was a simple tool, not particularly threatening as weapons go. But its presence raised serious questions about Marcus's actions. "Captain Reynolds, sir," Edmund said, turning to face the captain directly, "Thompson is making specific allegations about financial irregularities. These are serious charges that require investigation regardless of the circumstances surrounding how the information was obtained." "Captain?" Reynolds' confident demeanor flickered for just a moment. "Sir, with all due respect, Can't seriously be considering the ravings of a man who just broke into my office and threatened you with a weapon." "I didn't threaten anyone," Marcus protested. "Sir Edmund, if you'll just look at the photographs on my phone, you'll see invoices for equipment that was never delivered, contracts with companies that don't exist, and purchase orders that have been altered after approval." Sir Edmund held out his hand. "Let me see the phone." As Marcus handed over his device, Captain Reynolds made one final, desperate play. "Sir, I strongly advise against looking at any information obtained through illegal means. It could compromise ongoing security operations." But Sir Edmund was already scrolling through the photographs. His expression grew darker with each image he reviewed. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. False invoices, altered contracts, and financial records that clearly showed money being diverted from legitimate security purchases. "Captain Reynolds," Sir Edmund said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "these documents appear to show your signature on several questionable transactions. Those files are classified."
"Captain," Reynolds replied.
But his voice lacked its previous conviction. Thompson had no right to access them. "Perhaps not," Sir Edmund agreed. "But the content of these documents raises questions that demand immediate answers." He turned to the guards who had surrounded Marcus. "Stand down. Nobody is under immediate threat here." Marcus felt a wave of relief as the tension in the courtyard began to ease. But he knew this was far from over. Even if Sir Edmund believed the evidence, there would still be consequences for his methods. Sir Edmund continued studying the photographs, his security expertise allowing him to quickly identify the most damaging pieces of evidence. After several minutes, he looked up at Captain Reynolds with steel in his eyes. "Captain, I'm going to need you to accompany me to headquarters for questioning. These allegations are too serious to ignore." Regardless of how the information was obtained, Captain Reynolds' face went pale. He looked around the courtyard as if searching for an escape route, but he was surrounded by loyal guards who would follow Sir Edmund's orders without question. "This is a setup," Captain Reynolds said desperately. "Thompson is working with outside forces to destabilize our security operations. You're making a terrible mistake by trusting him." But his protests fell on deaf ears. Sir Edmund had seen enough corruption investigations to recognize the truth when it was presented to him. Even under unusual circumstances, what happened next shocked everyone in the courtyard. Captain Reynolds, realizing that his carefully constructed facade was crumbling, made a desperate decision. Instead of cooperating with Sir Edmund's investigation, he suddenly lunged toward Marcus with surprising speed and violence. "You've ruined everything," Reynolds screamed as he tackled Marcus to the ground. "Years of careful work destroyed by your meddling." The attack was so unexpected that even the trained guards were caught off guard for a split second. Reynolds and Marcus crashed to the stone pavement, grappling as the captain's composure completely shattered. His confession, in that moment of rage, revealed more than any investigation could have uncovered. Marcus, despite being caught off guard, quickly regained his composure. His years of combat training kicked in automatically. As Reynolds threw wild punches, Marcus defended himself with practiced efficiency. He managed to roll Reynolds over and pin him to the ground, using techniques he had learned during his military service before joining the Palace Guard. "Stand down, Captain," Marcus shouted, trying to restore some semblance of order to the chaotic situation. "You're only making this worse for yourself." But Reynolds was beyond reason. The pressure of maintaining his criminal activities for so long, combined with the shock of being exposed, had triggered a complete breakdown. He continued, struggling violently. Screaming accusations and threats at Marcus, Sir Edmund immediately took command of the situation. "Guards, secure Captain Reynolds immediately." His voice cut through the chaos with unmistakable authority. 4 guards rushed forward, carefully separating the 2 men. Reynolds continued his erratic behavior, alternating between threats against Marcus and desperate pleas for understanding. His actions had transformed him from a respected officer into a dangerous liability. In a matter of minutes, the equipment failures, Reynolds ranted as the guards restrained him. They were necessary sacrifices. The money was needed for other operations. "You don't understand the bigger picture?" Sir Edmund listened to these admissions with growing horror. Each word that came out of Reynolds' mouth provided further evidence of his guilt and revealed the scope of his betrayal. Marcus stood up slowly, brushing dust from his uniform. His hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but he maintained his professional demeanor. The screwdriver lay forgotten on the ground, no longer relevant to the situation that had unfolded. Sir Edmund Marcus said respectfully, "I apologize for the unorthodox methods I used to gather this information. I understand there will likely be consequences for my actions, but I believe the safety of everyone here was at stake." Sir Edmund studied Marcus carefully. The young guard's integrity was evident in his willingness to accept responsibility even after being vindicated. His attack on protocol had been motivated by genuine concern for his fellow guards and the royal family they all served. "Thompson," Sir Edmund said firmly, "your methods were indeed unorthodox, and they will need to be addressed. However, your motivations appear to have been honorable, and the evidence you uncovered has prevented what could have been a catastrophic security failure." The crowd of spectators who had remained to watch the ceremony were buzzing with confusion and concern. Palace staff were quickly working to escort them away from the scene, while security personnel established a perimeter around the area. Lieutenant Sarah, having witnessed the entire confrontation from her position, she looked at Marcus with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Marcus," she said quietly, "when I saw you in the captain's office earlier, I knew something serious was happening. I'm glad you found the courage to do the right thing." Reynolds had finally stopped struggling, but his breathing was heavy, and his eyes held the look of a man whose world had completely collapsed. The guards maintained their hold on him as Sir Edmund prepared to escort him from the premises. "Captain Reynolds," Sir Edmund said with cold formality, "you are being detained pending a full investigation into these allegations. You have the right to legal counsel, and I strongly suggest you exercise that right." The fallen captain looked up at Marcus with hatred in his eyes. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "There are others involved in this operation. You have no idea what you've started." Marcus felt a chill at those words. If Reynolds was telling the truth, the corruption might extend far beyond what he had uncovered. The investigation was just beginning. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same courtyard where his life had changed forever. The morning sun cast the same long shadows, but everything else was different. The investigation that followed Captain Reynolds' arrest had uncovered a corruption network that extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. Reynolds had been sentenced to 8 years in prison for embezzlement, fraud, and endangering public safety. The investigation revealed that over $2 million had been stolen from security budgets across multiple government facilities. The faulty equipment he had approved had been replaced, and comprehensive security reviews were conducted at every installation. Marcus had faced disciplinary action for his unauthorized entry into Captain Reynolds' office, but Sir Edmund had recommended the lightest possible punishment given the circumstances. He received a formal reprimand and was required to complete additional training on proper investigative procedures. Many felt he should have been commended rather than disciplined. The screwdriver that had started it all was now evidence in a closed case, locked away in a police storage facility. Marcus sometimes wondered if he would have found another way to expose the corruption if he had known how dramatic the confrontation would become Sir Edmund had personally overseen. Marcus's career development following the incident. Rather than viewing him as a troublemaker, he recognized Marcus's integrity and investigative instincts as valuable assets. Marcus had been promoted to senior guard and given additional responsibilities in security oversight. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had also been promoted, taking over many of Captain Reynolds' former duties. She had proven instrumental in the investigation, helping to identify other potential security vulnerabilities that might have been exploited by criminals. The royal family, when informed of the situation, had personally thanked Marcus for his dedication to their safety. They understood that his actions, while unorthodox, had prevented potentially catastrophic security failures that could have put lives at risk. As Marcus adjusted his new insignia, he reflected on the lessons learned from that harrowing day. Sometimes doing the right thing required taking risks and making difficult choices. The system wasn't perfect, and occasionally it took individuals with courage. To expose its flaws, he had received letters from guards at other facilities who had been inspired by his story to report their own concerns about equipment failures and budget irregularities. The investigation had sparked a nationwide review of security procurement practices, leading to stronger oversight and accountability measures. The palace felt safer now, not just because the corruption had been exposed, but because everyone knew that there were people willing to stand up for what was right, even when it meant putting their careers on the line. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through the photos from that day. The evidence that had seemed so dangerous to obtain was now part of public record, used in congressional hearings and training programs for security personnel across the country. As the morning ceremony began, Marcus took his position with pride. He had learned that being a guard meant more than just following orders and maintaining traditions. It meant being willing to question authority when necessary and having the courage to act when lives were at stake. The royal family appeared for the ceremony, and Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that the equipment protecting them was now reliable and properly maintained. His fellow guards wore their uniforms with renewed confidence. Knowing that someone was watching out for their safety too, Sir Edmund caught Marcus's eye from across the courtyard and nodded approvingly. The gesture conveyed more than words could express. Marcus had proven himself to be exactly the kind of person the palace guard needed. Someone who understood that true loyalty sometimes required difficult choices. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus remained at his post, watching over the people he had sworn to protect. The screwdriver was gone, but the principles that had driven him to use it remained stronger than ever. He was ready for whatever challenges might come next, knowing that he had the support of his colleagues and the satisfaction of having done the right thing when it mattered most.